Good morning, Women's Council of Realtors and attendees. My name is Jay Wu. I'm the president for the 2024 Women's Council of Realtors, LA-Beverly Hills. I'm going to have Martise, who is our president-elect, welcome herself. And then we'll have Rachel Robin, our director of membership, share our inspiration with us, mission statement, with us. And then we'll have Amy Yang, who is our current director of events, also share our vision statement with us. So without further ado, Martise, will you say hello and introduce yourself as well as your position?
Yes, so my name is Martise Brunfield. I'm with Keller Williams Realty. I am president-elect for 2024 Women's Council of Realtors. And Chris and Sarah, I'm looking forward to hearing the information that you guys have to share.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martise. Rachel Robin, will you share our mission statement with us?
So Rachel Robin with Cal Best Title and the membership director for Women's Council of Realtors, LA-Beverly Hills. Our mission statement for Women's Council is we are a network of successful realtors advancing women as business leaders in the industry and in communities that we serve.
Great, thank you so much. And next up, we have Amy Yang with our inspiration.
Hello, my name is Amy and I am with Compass. I am the events director of the Women's Council Realtor. The vision statement is to be the premier source and standard for the personal and professional development and inclusion of leaders in industry, organized real estate, and beyond.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. Sorry, got a little bit garbled there. I do want to thank Miss Sarah Rubio, who has been attending and supporting our events. And we actually have a trophy for you and Chris, by the way, from our installation to give to you. We just haven't seen you in person. Maybe we can present it in person for our March event. Just introduce yourself before we introduce our grand presenter today.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much, Jay. And my name is Sarah Rubio. I work in marketing and public relations for LaRocca Inspections. And it's really just getting to know the real estate community, how we can work together to make it a safe space to succeed. And we love working with the Women's Council. We love education and just anything we can do to better this space, but how we can contribute to that. And so, yeah, that's pretty much why we're here, and we'll continue to support.
And will you introduce our presenter today?
Yes, absolutely. We have Chris Griffin, who is the president of LaRocca Inspections. He has been in this business for over 20 years and is highly professional, highly knowledgeable on the transaction. Anything you could run into, he has run into, and is able to answer any question that you might have. So feel free to take this opportunity and ask those questions. And here he is.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And without further ado, Mr. Chris Griffin, thank you so much. Just such a great supporter, not only of Women's Council of Realtors, but in addition, I see him at the Greater Los Angeles Association of Realtors. I know he supports a lot of organizations, but we are so grateful you support us because we are all about education, visionary, as well as inspiring our future leaders within the real estate organization. So thank you for being here, Chris.
Well, thank you, Jay, for that wonderful introduction. And Sarah, thank you so much. It's almost as if you know me and work with me. That's fantastic. All right, well, hello to everybody. Without further ado, we will get this started. Sarah basically already, and Jay also already introduced me. I have been in the construction trade most of my life. I've been in the inspection industry for 23 years. We are celebrating LaRocca is celebrating its 30th year incorporated in this year, 2024. So we're very excited about that. And what I'm going to present to you today is a presentation called Navigating the Inspection Contingency on your screen. And as Sarah said, as I'm going through this presentation, feel free to click into the chat box and maybe ask any questions that you have, or if I go over something that maybe you're confused about or don't quite understand, I would rather sort of stop right then and handle any question or confusion that may be occurring, as opposed to getting all the way to the end of this and everybody's like, you know, falling asleep because we've gone by something that's misunderstood. There's a lot of information in this presentation, and I'm assuming, Sarah, I'll expect you to sort of monitor the chat box and you give me a heads up or interrupt me if anything like that does occur. Okay, good. We have a fairly small live audience today, but we are recording, so hopefully we'll have a bigger audience that is able to enjoy this presentation at their own leisure. Without further ado, let's get into it. One of the reasons why I put together this presentation is many years ago, as a matter of fact, just at the GLAR event a couple weeks ago, the installation event, the outgoing president, I think it was, made a mention, actually even wrote it in the program, that, you know, the real estate industry is a highly litigated industry, and California is among the top 5 of all the United States that are litigated the most. And the main reason, the number one reason in my research has shown that it's because of a failure to disclose. Now, a failure to disclose can come from anywhere. I mean, it could come from a seller not disclosing because they forgot. It could come from a seller not disclosing because they actually tried to hide something. It could come from any source that knows something that basically the buyer should, you know, be aware of. So it can be kind of a sticky subject, tricky to navigate around. In the real estate industry, there's a saying, location, location, location. And in the inspection industry, there's a saying, disclose, disclose, disclose. I don't believe that disclosure can hurt anyone. I believe having everything on the table that can be put on the table can be addressed. As long as it's there for view, you can do something with it. Parties can be responsible to create something from whatever that disclosure may be. If it's hidden or not talked about, then of course that can potentially create future issues. So really, one of the reasons for inspections, for home inspection, is to help avoid those legal issues, obviously help avoid transaction delays and cancellations, and to sort of help get that target off the real estate backs, because now we have something that can be brought to the table, can be disclosed, and can be talked about and worked through during that escrow. Obviously, the real estate inspections are done by professional inspectors. They're not done by realtors. But you as realtors, you're the conduit to this transaction, and you're going to manage the inspection process to help ensure a successful transaction. Obviously, managing your client's expectations, whether they be sellers or buyers, as to what this whole contingency period is about, what the inspection period is about, answering their questions to help that process be successful for them as buyers and or sellers. A lot of buyers, you know, have trepidation, or sellers even have trepidation about a home inspection or real estate inspection because they don't want to find anything wrong. And I understand that, but the fact that an inspector might find something wrong does not necessarily mean a seller has to do anything about it. And it does also not necessarily mean that a buyer should have the expectation that the seller does something about it. So it really is good to just, you know, have that communication and help manage their expectations of the process. One of the ways I find that, and you guys as professional realtors have obviously found this too, but I have discovered that by following your California Association of Realtors advisories, your card documents that have to do with the inspection contingency period, is a great way to help manage your client's expectations. These are documents that should be gone over by your buyer and or seller, whatever applies. And of course, these documents also apply to particular escrows. This escrow has to be under, you know, a regular residential purchase agreement and joint escrow instructions, so forth and so on. But the information in these documents can be used in really in any transaction, at least for informational purposes. But basically, one of the favorite documents that I've gone through is the Statewide Buyer and Sellers Advisory. We're going to talk a little bit more about that document. Also, the BIE, the Buyers Inspection Elections document, which I will be willing to bet that there's a little blurb in that document that many of you may have read and forgot about, or just don't know that that's what they said. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyway, follow your California Association of Realtors documents to help manage your clients' expectations, to keep things moving forward, so forth and so on. Obviously, your clients need to be educated on their roles, their rights, their duties. You know, buyer they obviously don't have an obligation to be at the inspection or to, you know, come see the house that they're buying or the property they're buying. It's just a really good idea. And I would suggest as real estate agents, as you guys already probably know, it's probably best to at least have them engaged to some degree. I think it's important. I would request, when I was an inspector, I would request if my agent ever asked, is it okay if my buyer comes to the inspection? It's an absolute yes. I would like the buyer there. I would like the buyer to take that time that they're at that property to sort of walk through it. When you really think about it, how much time does a buyer have to spend in the property that they're potentially purchasing for the rest of their lives to raise their family in? You know, they may have seen it, you know, during an open house, or you showed it to them. It could be a, you know, private little listing that you saw and you thought of a client that it was perfect for, so they went and looked at it. And then, of course, they come and they look at it, and then they open escrow, and then they go to inspection, and then they do a final walkthrough. So it's really a very short period of time. So maximizing, you know, their time that they are allowed or can be at that home, I feel is a good idea for them to get to know it, see how it flows, you know, measure the bedroom to see if their bed and their end tables are going to fit. All of those sort of personal things that an inspector or a real estate agent is really not there to, you know, solve, if you will. Now, also, there are documents that help with setting those expectations and helping the buyer understands what their rights and duties are. And one of those documents is the Statewide Buyer Sellers Advisory. That document says buyer's rights and duties. You should conduct thorough investigations of the property, both personally and with appropriate professionals. So obviously, appropriate professionals would be home inspectors, contractors, roofers, foundation guys, realtors, so forth and so on, and themselves. You know, why not walk through? I would invite my clients when I was an inspector to walk through and open some windows, swing open some doors, test some outlets, hit some light switches. If they found anything that they wanted me to put further attention on, I would have them bring my attention to it, and I would look at it and from the view of an inspector, and if it was a reportable category or an item, it would go in the report. But I'd like to have them involved, and I think it's a good idea, you as agents, to have them involved as well. When they're making their own assessments and their own decisions, it can often help to keep a target off of your back. You know, you guys have a pretty heavy job to do. You're the conduit. You're sort of keeping the whole thing on schedule, keeping things moving forward. You're negotiating on their behalf, so forth and so on. But they should be as involved as you feel comfortable as having them involved, so that they can't ever turn around, or that you would minimize the risk of them turning around, basically saying you didn't want them involved, or you told them to do that, or you told them not to do this, so forth and so on. It helps to keep that target off your back. I like to look at it sort of like an onion. It's got many, many different layers. The more layers you have of protection, the better off you'll be.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Chris, I think too, you as an agent, it sets the tone for the type of business that you're running. You know, if you are a credible agent and you carry yourself as well as your business that way, then it actually does set the tone for you including the buyer in the entire process, not just the, you know, okay, well, sign this, you know, buyer broker representation agreement, but also throughout the entire transaction from the beginning to end. And so I know for me, that's one of the things that I always invite, because when particularly a first time buyer, when they're saying, well, do we have to attend because I have to work that day? Yes, absolutely. You know, and so my job is to educate them and say, okay, here's where we are. Here's a map of what you can expect that's going to happen in the transaction. And then if you set those expectations and so that they can calendar, you know, the way they should, time off or the time that's going to be required for them to do inspections, as you mentioned, then I think it just makes for a more simpler transaction, but also one in which the buyer feels empowered as opposed to not feeling empowered.
Martise, you do not know how appreciative I am of those comments. I really, really do appreciate you bringing that viewpoint and that perspective to this conversation. I'm just a home inspector. You know, I've been doing it for a very, very long time. I have seen deals go great. I've seen deals go sour. And I do think I know a little bit about the tools that when you apply them the way that you're speaking of, I've seen those transactions go much, much more smoothly when you are applying your tools and you're getting your buyers to be responsible for, you know, what they're purchasing. So I very much appreciate that. I do know that some of the information maybe that I share sometimes with realtors, only because I have had feedback. I don't want to sound like I'm coming off like I know what it's like to be you guys. So I very much appreciate the fact that I can share information with you from my viewpoint, and that your feedback to me is that's correct, and that you share those similar values and views. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit before the presentation. If professionals recommend further inspections, you should contact qualified experts. What makes a qualified expert? You know, a lot of people think that a license or a certificate qualifies that expert. Okay, that's definitely a good sort of a gauge. You know, typically any contractor that decided to go out and get licensed would typically mean that they are, you know, serious about what they do, but it's not the end all, you know, where all of the thing. Qualified experts, in my opinion, are more about experience in that arena, experience with that thing, experience in that area. Yeah, to protect yourself legally, it would be great to make sure everybody was licensed and, you know, had certain criteria that met the qualified experts category. But you definitely wouldn't want to hire, you know, let's say a teenager, first job, you know, building sandwiches at Subway. You wouldn't want to hire them to come over and fix your plumbing system. I don't know. Maybe they would, you know, wrap it in duct tape and call it good. I don't know. But if you want something fixed or looked at that is an important part of safety and or health or something like that, then you would want to make sure that that professional or that expert that you hired for that would be that, you know, would have those that criteria. But the statement here, professionals recommend further inspections. Oftentimes as inspectors, we do recommend further examination or inspection of a system. And our clients need to understand that we're sort of there as a general practitioner. A real estate inspector is a generalist. They're not a specialist. So it's kind of like you go to your family doctor once a year for your checkup and whatnot, and he's sort of the generalist of that field. And if you have particular concerns about something going on with yourself, he or she may recommend further evaluation by that specialist in the field, like ear, nose, and throat. You know, doctor, you could go to your regular doctor complaining of maybe some sinus condition, and they may recommend that you go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor to get further evaluation. So that's really what that statement means. If a home inspector is finding enough issues with, let's say, the plumbing system, and then recommends further evaluation of the plumbing system, they're going to recommend it be evaluated by a plumber, a licensed qualified plumber. Goes on to say you should read all written reports given to you and discuss these reports with the persons who prepared them. Now, I can't tell you how many times the inspector was not involved in a conversation to answer questions about the report that inspector generated for the client. The client went straight to the real estate agent and said, well, what does the inspector mean in this part of the report where it says this or that? And I think it's fine that you as realtors are wanting to contribute to the conversation. But I think it's important that if it's a question that if answered incorrectly could get you in trouble or not really give the client any usable information, then it's very important to just get that client back in contact with the inspector. As realtors, that client is under contract with you as their real estate agent. You have a fiduciary duty to that client. We are under contract with that client, so they're a mutual client. So we have a fiduciary duty to them. We have an obligation to fulfill our contract and our job description, so forth and so on, just like you do. So I think it's very important. We're a team. We're all a team. And when we're operating as a team, we're trying to help the success of the other person on that team. I know at LaRocca and most home inspectors these days, I can tell you 20 years ago, it wasn't like this. Most home inspectors these days are wanting the escrow to close. They're not going to do things to try and manipulate that, of course, but they're not there to try to stop that escrow closing. They're trying to move the transaction forward. They're trying to be helpful. So recognize that we're on your team, and we would never, at least at LaRocca, are never going to say anything to our mutual client that would try to interrupt this escrow being closed.
Awesome. And Chris, we have one question from David Norman in the chat.
Good. Let me look at this chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great question, David. David writes in the chat, "Dear Mr. Griffin, thank you for calling me Mr. Griffin. You can call me Chris, though. That's fine. Does the general inspector have a duty to put on the report any signs of mold or recommend further evaluation?" That is a fantastic question. And likely this presentation is going to answer that question. The simple answer is no. And then the simple answer to back that up is yes. So I know that's confusing because I'm saying yes and no and yes. And we're going to get into that, David. We're going to actually look at a document that actually tells you what to do. Is that all right with you, David? You're smiling. Oh, you have clients blaming you 2 to 3 years later. You and I should have a conversation, David. You contact me and I can help you with that. So are we good for now, David? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. Here we go. That's a great question, and we will touch on that actual topic a little bit later in this presentation. The statewide buyer sales advisor goes on to say, "You are strongly advised to investigate the condition and suitability of all aspects of the property. If you do not do so, you are acting against the advice of brokers." So this is basically the brokers stating, the realtors stating, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, seller, whatever you are, you have an obligation here. You have a duty during this inspection period. Please act accordingly. That's all that's really saying, right? The seller, they have rights and duties. They have a duty to disclose material facts known to them that affect the value or desirability of the property. This goes back to what we were saying earlier about disclosure. Obviously, I understand, and you guys as agents probably understand this too, that sometimes sellers forget things that happened. They had a leak in the house in the roof 30 years ago. There was an insurance claim. The leak's been fixed and it hasn't leaked in 30 years. Who's going to remember that? Probably no one. But basically, this is like anything that if your buyer and or you can prompt them, to disclose whatever they may know about the property, it's fantastic. Any of those disclosures, you are more than welcome to go over with your home inspector so that they may pay particular attention to that area so that they can see what condition it is in now at present time. They are obligated to make the property available to the buyer and have the utilities on for inspection as allowed by the agreement. That's actually in the residential purchase agreement, that the seller will have the utilities on during the contingency period and that they will remain on during that entire period. It's impossible. I wouldn't even bother. If you call to the listing agent and, okay, is the property ready to be inspected? Well, yes, but we don't have the water on, the gas is off, the electricity is not on. I wouldn't even do the inspection, to be honest with you. There are too many things that we can't tell you. If the water's not on, I can't tell you if you have hot water coming out of the left side of the faucet. I can't tell you if the water lines leak. I can't tell you if the drains are working properly because I can't drain anything. If the electricity is on, forget it. I can't flip light switches, test outlets. I can't turn on a heater. If you have an electric water heater or electric appliances, I can't tell you anything about those things. And the gas also, if you have a gas heater, there's no way to tell that. Gas, one of the ways that a leak is detected in a gas system is the smell. That smell, I don't know if you know, but the smell is an additive. Natural gas doesn't really smell like anything. They actually add that pungent odor into the gas so that when you smell it, you go, oh, that's gas. Yes, we all know it is gas. It's actually not really gas. I mean, you're smelling the gas that has been odorized. And that's the important thing of having the gas on, because oftentimes the way to detect a gas leak is just by the smell that you can smell. And
Hey,
of course,
Chris.
yes.
I do have an incident where when people do not have those services on, 9 times out of 10, I believe they're hiding something. And we've had some disingenuous sellers and the agents. We had to go to mediation on this, where our buyer purchased a property, went through inspections. After multiple requests, they just kept delaying the gas being on. Turned out there was a leak, big issue. And only when our buyer got to turn the gas on, and then the leak was detected. So definitely this is the largest purchase of people's lives. And I would dare say, when people are not allowing for certain full access or full visibility or full ability to test all the systems, just halt the process until they do, because it just is inappropriate. It's kind of like trying to get a prescription without ever seeing the x-ray or seeing the body. It's not a fair way to move forward. So that's the analogy I try to share with my clients, because we've been through this line too many times to know, if they will not turn everything on, if they will not, let the water be running, gas, electricity, then we can't fully, it's not a whole product to be able to review.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for sharing that. That's so true. Transparency, in a real estate, in an escrow, in a real estate transaction, transparency, I think, is of utmost importance. It creates trust. It creates a rapport between agents, between buyers and sellers. And when, as Jay was explaining, and I agree, when there's something that seems a little bit off, and it's like something so easy to turn the gas on is being sort of, thrust upon the buyer that, oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not turning the gas on for you, for whatever reason. There may be something a little bit nefarious happening there, a little bit sort of like, what is going on here? So yeah, heed Jay's advice, like, stop, just stop and just go, okay, we're slowing this thing down. Again, you are the conduit of that transaction, and you are the one that has the fiduciary duty to your client. And in Jay's case, so escrow closed, and then the client got the gas turned on. That's when they
Yes,
Right.
that they discovered it after the fact, and we had disclosures. We had asked the agents, and unfortunately, the agents literally just lied about the situation. We knew, based upon looking back to communication, they were lying to our agent about what
Right.
they did and did not know, and there
Right.
was a lot of unusual things. David also asked, if the seller's representative tell you all the utilities are on and you book an inspection, which of course we all have to deal with very short contingency periods, and the inspector can't do the work because one or more utilities are still not turned on, what happens in this situation? Can you ask the seller to pay for the reinspection? Do you see it play out most of the time based on how do you see it play out based on your experience?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question too. You can ask the seller to pay for the reinspection. You can. In the residential purchase agreement, it does state that the buyer shall pay for all inspections. But in my opinion, I think any real estate agent with even the minimal negotiation skills would likely be able to make a good argument for having the seller pay for those continuation or completion inspections or re-inspections, based on the fact that it was the seller who caused something to occur where the property wasn't made fully available for the inspection that day. I personally think the best way to go about it is don't do the inspection. If the second best situation is that we're going to do the inspection, but one and or some of those utilities are going to be off, I think it's very important that you let the buyer know that likely we will be requesting, the completion inspection once that gas is on or once the water is on, and that I'm going to ask the seller to pay for those, get the listing agent's agreement, so forth and so on. And in worst case scenario, the buyer pays for them. The buyer's basically paying for information so that they can move forward comfortably on a transaction that is going to be a lifelong choice for the most part. In the case that Jay was sharing with us, unfortunately, the buyer found out about it after escrow closed. Now, can they still do something about it? Yes, but it's going to probably cost them more to sue somebody, bring a case against somebody, name agents and sellers, than it is to just call the plumber or the gas company and have the gas pipe fixed. So it's really kind of a sad scenario that it does happen, but I think you should guard yourself, obviously, as best as you can against that from occurring. But David, that's really the input I would have on how you could handle that, when you're opening up the contingency period.
Thank you.
Yep. Other sellers' duties. Make spaces accessible and viewable. This is very important. We have on the left here, we have a picture of just a room, a bedroom, if you will, that's just full of stored personal items. The inspectors are there not only to look at the 5 major systems, the plumbing, the heating and air, the electrical, the roof, and the foundation, but they're also there to test outlets, get the light switches, open and close windows, open and close doors, look at the condition of floors, walls, ceilings, so forth and so on. And when there's all these stored personal items in the way, it's limiting the inspection. Now, of course, a house that's lived in is perfectly fine. A house that has furniture and or is staged is perfectly fine. That's something that the inspection was designed to sort of, get around. We're just talking about not overly crowded or covered or concealed spaces, much like the picture on the right, which is a garage that's just full of stored personal items. We oftentimes inspect vacant houses that are not staged, that are just literally vacant. They're wide open. Fantastic. We love it as inspectors. Everything's open to view. But then when we go outside to inspect the garage, we find out why the house is vacant and there's nothing in it because everything's been moved to the garage. So we can't inspect the garage. And per the CREA standards and the laws of home inspection in California, it is the primary residence and its primary parking structure that is part of the inspection. So as best as we can arrange with the listing side and the sellers to make these things available for us. It doesn't mean they have to go and clear out every closet and clear out every cabinet and remove 40 years worth of things out of their garage, but as best as they can, make them viewable and accessible. Otherwise, what the report is going to say is it's not accessible, therefore cannot be viewed. And if it can't be viewed, it can't be assessed. So we're not really able to deliver to the client, our client, the buyer in this case, a report that really gives them any information that they can operate off of. So they're kind of going into it blindly, much like the gas line situation that Jay had there. Obviously quite a bit less of a problem usually, but it can be that way. And also we need to make sure that all the pets are secured, okay? And for you dog lovers, of course, there you go. I have 3 of these guys myself. I love Basset Hounds. That's why we chose to put a picture of one of them in the presentation here. I have a quick story for you, kind of a humorous story. John LaRocca, the founder of our company, who passed away a few years ago, but he was at an inspection and he went in and the seller was getting ready to go off for the day, go to work or whatnot. And he told John and the realtors and the buyer, my dog's in the back bedroom, please don't let my dog out. And everybody kind of said, okay. And not sure how it happened, but the dog got out. So after the inspection was done, they discovered the dog was gone. John went out into the neighborhood, got the dog, brought him into the house, put him into the bedroom, closed the door, went home. About 10 o'clock that evening, John LaRocca gets a phone call on his cell phone, and it's the seller of the house saying, hey, I got your number through the realtor. Where is my dog and why is my neighbor's dog in my house? So obviously John made the mistake of not going and meeting the dog originally to know what it even looked like. So the neighbor's dog was locked in a strange bedroom for X amount of
Oh
hours.
no.
Yep, it turned out okay. They ended up, the dog ended up coming home, and the seller took the dog to, back over to his neighbor. But the point I'm making is that that's not an inspector's or a realtor's job or a buyer's job. The seller needs to make sure that their pets are taken care of. So a happy ending to a otherwise funny story. Statewide Buyer Sellers Advisory goes on to talk about the broker's rights and duties. You do not have expertise in all areas and matters affecting the property or your evaluation of it. Unfortunately, as has been mentioned here, there can sometimes be unscrupulous realtors. And some of them basically just don't want to know what's going on with the home inspection or what's in the report. They figure if they don't know, they don't have to disclose, so forth and so on. And there are also others who think that they're the home inspector. Oh, I've done 100 home inspections. I would venture to guess that they've never done one. They might have been sitting at that breakfast table on their computer while an inspection was going on, and maybe have been briefed numerous times as to what occurred at the inspection, but I would suggest that they probably haven't actually done it. For most sales of residential properties with no more than 4 units, brokers have a duty to make a reasonably confident visual inspection, your AVID, your agent visual inspection disclosure. Likely all of you guys have taken your courses on mitigating your risk management, so forth and so on. AVIDs are extraordinarily important for you. And likely, as you've known, don't get too descriptive in your AVID. If there's a stain on the ceiling, you can call it a discoloration or a stain, but don't try to connect that with a roof leak or something like that. But definitely, if you find things that you're putting on your AVID, bring them to the attention of your inspector. Your inspector may be able to bring more information to the table to really kind of help figure out what occurred there. And then, of course, that's a great opportunity to get disclosure from the seller. Refer to experts. We actually talked about this a little bit before we even started this presentation. If brokers give a referral to another professional, brokers do not guarantee that person's performance. So let's just make sure that they are professional and that they are expert in their field and that they do know what they're doing and that they're actually going to help the client, whether they be the seller or the buyer. So, an expert that's actually going to bring information to the table to help answer a question, establish a position, whatever it may be. But they should be experts. They shouldn't just be someone who's not very educated in that field, that your client needs help with, that you or your client may need help with. Refer to the documents. Sarah can tell you this. I don't answer questions in my company. I basically, I refer them to a document. I refer them to either the policy that we have or the write-up or the hat pack. Every one of our employees, every one of our executives, they have a job description that's written up. We have an entire hat for an inspector or an executive or a manager or a regular employee. And I try to refer them as best as I can to that document. As a matter of fact, for example of that, I got a phone call from an inspector yesterday saying that they're calling me about some emergency meeting that I sent them an email on, that they were supposed to get online and have this emergency meeting. And I said, you need to forward that email right away to HR and do not open it and do not click on any links, because I never sent an email out calling an emergency meeting. And I referred him to the document that tells him where to do that, which is in his inspector's hat pack. So I like to, as best as I can, offer the information to you as realtors as best as you can. Refer to whatever document it is that you have and that you're knowledgeable of that would help answer that question for your client. David had a question earlier. Should I have a mold inspection? Well, we're going to refer to a document here pretty soon that's going to answer that question. Your statewide buyer sellers advisory continues to say that buyers are advised to have the property inspected by a professional property inspection service within buyer's inspection contingency period. It goes on to say a licensed building contractor or other professional may perform these services. There was a long time when I first got into this industry that there was an idea, many agents thought that having a general contractor do the home inspection was a better way to go than having a home inspector do the home inspection. And there was an idea that if you were a home inspector, you were in a better position to have been a contractor in the past. Now, I'm not here to argue that. I'm not here to say that that is true or untrue, but I will tell you this. I have seen home inspections go completely south when a general contractor did the inspection. There's a certain hat, there's a certain criteria, there are certain standards, and there are certain laws that a home inspector must adhere to when doing a home inspection that do not apply to a general contractor. A general contractor can walk through that home and say, oh, that's a code violation. Oh, that needs to be rebuilt. Oh, that needs to be upgraded. Oh my God, that wall needs to be torn down. Oh no, you can't have this, you can't have that. A home inspector is not going to do that. A home inspector has the perspective of following certain criteria and standards, okay, that they must adhere to. For instance, there's not a lot of general contractors out there who may know about what a grandfather clause is. You as realtors know what a grandfather clause is, and a home inspector knows what a grandfather clause is. As long as that item is safe to operate and was installed correctly and permitted and allowed at the time, then it's safe to remain. It's okay to remain. In other words, it doesn't necessarily have to be upgraded unless it falls into a category of potentially being unsafe or harmful or dangerous. But a contractor, a licensed contractor, doesn't necessarily have that perspective. So what I'm saying is that the home inspector has the perspective of a home inspection. A licensed general contractor has the perspective of a builder, okay? Very code, educated, code enforced, code induced. So have your inspection done by anybody you'd like, but I would suggest having them done by a certified, qualified real estate inspector. That's my plug.
Yeah, Jay says so true, and codes change so rapidly.
That's correct.
In the chat.
That's so true, Jay. You're absolutely right. That is true. The definition of a home inspection, and now this is per the California Civil Codes of home inspection. Definition of a home inspection is a survey and basic operation, I touched on this a little earlier, of the systems and components of a building which can be reached, entered, or viewed without difficulty, moving obstructions, or requiring any action which may result in damage to the property or personal injury to the inspector. So obviously that picture you saw of that cluttered garage, if the inspector started climbing on top of that car and moving things around, that can potentially harm the seller's property and potentially cause injury to the inspector. So they're not going to be able to inspect that area. And the purpose of the inspection is to provide the client with the information regarding the general condition of the building or buildings. The general condition, again, going back to what I was talking about, your general practitioner as opposed to the expert. Now this is fun here. The definition of a home inspection report. So you have the definition of a home inspection, and a home inspection report is defined a little bit differently. A home inspection report provides written documentation of material defects. Material defects is underlined because there's actually a definition of material defects per California Civil Code 7195-B. And that is, a material defect is a condition that significantly affects the value, desirability, habitability, or safety of the dwelling. I think this is important to know as realtors, because when you're trying to negotiate on behalf of your client for a stain on a carpet, when that is just so minute that you want to try to help steer your client to, hey, let's stick with the bigger stuff. Let's go after the more the stuff that would be more significant, like the hole in the roof. I would suggest that we start negotiating before the stain on the carpet. You know what I mean? And it's a great way to help, again, manage your client's expectations as to what you're going to be negotiating on their behalf of, or what their attention should really be on. So it significantly affects the value, desirability, habitability, or safety. Style or aesthetic shall not be considered in determining whether a system, structure, or component is defective. So obviously, you know, the avocado colored kitchen appliances and the orange shag carpet. We don't care. We don't care. CREA has three reportable categories. CREA stands for the California Real Estate Inspection Association. So your inspectors, either my inspectors are already CREA certified or they're enrolled and they are candidates for their certificates. But CREA, we follow the standards of practice that CREA has put out there, and there's three categories, safety being one of them and of paramount importance. Items that are at the ends of their service lives and items that are not functioning properly. This one's a good one because I think anybody, you don't have to be an inspector to tell that this item's not functioning properly.
Well, the first one too, Chris, I mean, that's actually happening right now, and in many parts of California is that situation right there. So that's very precarious, not only visually, but I mean, my stomach lurches just looking at that visual.
Yeah, this is common, let's say in the Silver Lake Hills or in Malibu. I mean, you just have
Palos Verdes,
exactly.
Culver Crest, those homes are all kind of slipping down the slopes here.
That's right, that's right.
Mulholland.
Mulholland as well, of course, any hillside home, typically on a hillside home or any area that has expansive soils, the inspectors are going to be recommending a geotechnical expert further evaluate, you know, that structure, that property, and how the structure is navigating, if you will, on that property. But safety is the number one issue. So as an inspector is going through the systems, they're looking at it from a viewpoint of safety. Is it at the end of its service life? And is it functioning properly? Now, end of its service life is a category that can be subject to a little bit of disagreement, of perspective, if you will. The Bank of America and the Builders Union of America put out a survey about 10 years ago. Not a survey. They put out a document called expected the expected life expectancy of home components. So they did a whole testing and surveying and so forth and so on, and they determined that a heater is supposed to last between 15 to 25 years. A forced air heater, a wall heater could last considerably longer than that. A composition roof should last X amount of years. A tile roof should last X amount of years. A foundation, an electrical system, a copper plumbing system, cast iron plumbing, so forth and so on. So the inspector is viewing those things based on the knowledge that they've learned that came from an accredited agency. Remember earlier in this presentation, I said it's always best to answer questions or steer and guide your client with documents that are in writing that came from an accredited agency. Our inspectors operate off of that as well. So if they're looking at a heating system, for instance, heating and air conditioning that is 50 years old, but it is operating impeccably, it's absolutely fine. It looks like it's been very, very well maintained. Those are all reportable conditions. The heater is old, but it appears to have been well maintained. Continue maintenance on this heater, you know, find out from the seller, get the seller's disclosures, maintenance routines, or what they're doing to maximize the longevity of this heater, and continue to follow that. But just know it is beyond its expected life, but that doesn't mean it needs to be replaced tomorrow. So having also that perspective in a home inspector is something that you're looking for. But that is an item, that is a category that the inspector is viewing things from. Then, of course, if an item is not functioning properly, we all know that it just doesn't work properly. This item is serving both as a dishwasher and as a floor washing machine, and you know, a flood inducing item that's going to bring an insurance claim. So the major systems, I touched on them a little bit earlier. You have 5 major systems in any habitable structure. Remember, for a habitable structure to be habitable, it would require these systems. It needs to have a plumbing system. It needs to have an electrical system. It needs to have heat. It does not need to have air conditioning, but I'm sure you're all aware that code requires heating in a habitable area. But it doesn't require air conditioning, in other words, cooling. It needs to have a foundation. That building needs to sit on something, and it needs to have something that protects it, the envelope, from moisture, and that would be the roofing. So those are the 5 major systems that the inspector is viewing in those 3 categories: safety, functionability, and end of service life. Aesthetics and cosmetics shall not be considered. If your client wants to live in Whoville, totally fine, that's cool. I would love to inspect the roof over there on the house that looks like a shoe. That would just be fun. So the CREA standards of practice, obviously has limitations, exceptions, and exclusions. These are just some of them. Obviously, for a full list, it says please refer to your handout. This would be a handout that Sarah would have given if we were in person. But we do give a handout of the CREA standards and of our buyer-sellers information pack when we're doing these in person. But you can go to CREA's website, or you can actually go to my website. The CREA standards are up on our website as well. And you can get the full list of things that we don't, they're excluded. So when it says here conditions related to animals or insects, we're talking about termites for the most part. We by law are not allowed to say the word termite or to indicate that there is termite activity. We can definitely say that there seems to be, some activity of a, foreign substance or something like that, that then we would further recommend that the pest control operator comes in and evaluates. And to David's question earlier, other organisms, including fungus and mold, it actually is beyond the scope of the CREA certified home inspector. But any CREA certified home inspector that is worth their salt, if they're seeing things that look like mold or that look like could induce mold in the future and or appears to maybe have been a problem in the past, they definitely should bring that to the attention of you and your client. Remember that the first duty of any inspector is to observe and report. It's how they report is very important. You wouldn't want a generalist home inspector who knows nothing about mold to be your mold inspector or to tell you that is mold or is not mold. You wouldn't, because they likely are going to make a mistake. But it would be best, and cause a problem, in that mistake. But it would be best to bring to the attention of you and your client that they're observing conditions that may be mold inducing or may, you should have it further evaluated by that appropriate expert, I guess is what I'm getting at. So David, to answer your question, you don't want a home inspector being your mold inspector. That is a separate field of expertise. And that is something to go over with your client. If they are concerned about mold, then this is what they should be doing about mold. Qualifications for inspectors that you should look for and share with your clients: certification in reputable trade organization such as CREA or ASHI. ASHI is the American Society for Home Inspectors. Errors and omission insurance. They should all have errors and omissions insurance. They are human. They make mistakes. We want to make sure that our clients are made whole, or as whole as we can make them through insurance if it ever comes to that. That is why you guys have insurance. It's not there so everybody can just use it and know, oh, if they make a mistake, I'm going to use it. It's there to protect you in those very rare cases that it's needed. General liability insurance. Did you know that it's required for your buyers to have general liability insurance provided for anyone that they invite to that property during the contingency period? It's in your RPA, right? There's a statement in the RPA that says that the buyer shall provide general liability insurance for anyone that they would have on that property on their behalf during that contingency period. Well, we know, and you know, that that's never happened. that the buyers just don't do that. And why should they? They should hire companies that have general liability insurance. That's what they should be doing. So if they're having that plumber come out, make sure that they have that liability insurance. The home inspector, we do have it, make sure that they have it, so forth and so on. Experience is probably the number one thing. Any of you golf? Any of you scuba dive? You golf, Jay? Awesome. Awesome. So are you a good golfer?
No, is anyone a good golfer when they're golfing?
How do you become a good golfer?
Practice, practice, practice.
That's right. The more experience
Be a
you
professional. But the amateurs, you're never going to be a good golfer.
That's right. But the more experience you have, the more practice you have, the more games you play, the more you practice your putt, the more you practice your drive, so forth and so on. Experience is one of those things that is going to show how competent you are at being able to be a golfer. And you may just be doing it for fun because it is fun and you don't care. But you know, real estate transactions, we don't do them for fun. We do them because it's a professional industry. We want professional, experienced clients, people, you know, providing services, you know, for the client. So
but that's a very good analogy, Chris, because like a single family home or multi-unit and the game of golf, even though the game of golf is the same, you still drive and hit the irons and you putt. In a home, you have the same 5 systems, but depending on the wind, temperature, blade of grass, and where the hole location is on any given day on the game of golf, that determines what the outcome is going to be. In a home, every year that passes, every weathered part of that component of that structure, and the usage all changes what the outcome of what you're looking for can be. So very, very good analogies, because both are constantly moving because both days are passing, and that always changes.
That's right. Thank you for that, Jay. That's absolutely correct. And I like to, you know, you can even take an example of a home. Let's not even put a home up against golf. Let's put a home against a home against a home. Well, a home can be a single family residence. A home can be a condo. A home can be a mobile home. All 3 of those are completely different. And I wouldn't want the guy inspecting my mobile home who is an expert at inspecting single family residences, because they're not going to know anything about a mobile home's foundation or electrical system or how that works and so forth and so on. So that experience in those different types of dwellings is very, very important as well, even when you compare a home to a home to a home, as opposed to comparing it to golf or scuba diving or whatever else. So experience, I believe, in that thing is the most important thing. A computerized report with pictures and a narrative style is very important. I think it flows better, it's more informative, it's easier to understand. You know, it's easier for the realtors to use to prepare their preparing their list for repairs or to come up with negotiating for a better price on the project, on the property or whatnot. I still see inspectors out there that are still using those NCR, you know, little check boxes with a pen and paper and a clipboard. I just don't find them to be very informative. I don't find them to be aesthetically pleasing. And when they're charging about the same amount of money for the inspection, I think their product should be quite a bit better than that. Always refer qualified and non-alarming inspectors. Always refer inspectors that have perspective. You know, back in, I can't stay on this slide too long for copyright infringement, but back in the back in the day when I first started as a home inspector, the very first event I went to for the home inspection industry, what are those events called? We have one for car every year. You get the group in this big, huge, you know, area, and an expo, right? Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
I went to a home inspector expo and I literally saw all these people walking around. Now I'm brand new. I mean, like, my eyes are wide open. I'm trying to suck everything in and figure out this industry because I'm excited about starting a new career. You know, this is 23 years ago. And I saw all these people walking around with these shirts that had this, you know, had deal written on the shirt and this big cross through the deal and circled, you know, like deal canceled. And I got this idea like, wow, is that what we are as inspectors? We're there to try to cancel this deal. And I think some of them are just proud that they were going to bring all this information, you know, to the client. They were going to make them walk away and not be taken advantage of by their realtor and so forth and so on. And I thought this was absolutely ridiculous. Later, as I became an inspector, started doing my inspections, I obviously didn't have that perspective and that viewpoint when I was doing the inspections. But then when I became the general manager of LaRocca, and most certainly as I've moved through the ranks and became an owner and so forth and so on, and then became the president when John passed away, my perspective is like, hold on a second. We created this idea because I have heard from realtors that, you know, Chris, your inspector blew my deal, or that inspectors blow deals. I'll take full responsibility for that. We created that. We walked around with these shirts that deal breaker. That's not what we are. But I think at some time in the past, they thought that that was noble, and it's not. It's not at all. Again, I want to refer back to we're on your team. We want this transaction to go forward as smoothly as possible, and we want to help the client understand the information, that it's not there to, create any sort of disruption or mayhem. We may find things that are, let's just say, significant on a property. That doesn't mean it can't be fixed. It doesn't mean, especially in Southern California, common issues have common solutions. Common issues in Southern California are termites, property drainage, and foundations issues. Moisture intrusion, foundation, and termites. Every single one of those has standardized regular solutions. So when you speak about it, those significant issues on those terms, that there are solutions, you're already sort of mitigating any damage that an inspector would do by saying, oh my God, you have foundation issues because your drainage is not correct on the property. Okay, you don't want that inspector. You want the inspector saying, okay, so we have some things going on with the foundation that can easily be addressed by, handling some roof gutters on the east side of the building or whatever. So, common issues have regular solutions. Now, inspections versus general versus specialty. This kind of goes back to what we were saying before. Moisture and mold with the general inspection being akin to the generalist practitioner, the doctor. Moisture and mold in the CAR statewide buyer sellers advisory, it does talk about if the client is concerned about mold or has concerns about mold, then they should hire a professional mold inspector or an industrial hygienist to have the house tested for mold. Obviously rely on your inspectors, your general inspectors' input if they're seeing anything in that nature. But if your client says, I'm concerned about mold, please don't refer them to the general inspector. As we talked about earlier, that's not the person you want talking to your client about mold. It just isn't. I've seen too many times when that has gone south when it didn't need to. Chimneys, obviously any home that has a fireplace is going to have a chimney. We live in earthquake country. We live in this system, if not regularly maintained, can potentially become dangerous. It's always a good idea to have a camera inserted up into the chimney. The home inspector is going to give you what's called a level 1 FPA, the National Fire Protection Agency, is going to give you a level 1 inspection, which is essentially a cursory glance. They're going to view things from the areas that they can view them. Per the NFPA, a level 2 chimney inspection is required anytime a home transfers ownership. That's something that you guys may have not known as agents. That's a good thing to put in your quiver, if you will, for your layer of protection. Recommend those fireplace inspections per the NFPA. The fireplace inspector is going to insert a camera and really have a good view of all angles of that system. We're still finding damage from chimneys from the 1994 earthquake. Sewer lines, these things are out of sight, out of mind. Just because the toilet flushes or the shower drains does not mean the sewer is in good condition. That sewer pipe could be broken in half and it could be creating a void, underneath the ground, under the street or at the curb or whatever. And there's no way that's going to be discovered unless there's a camera put in there. Sewer lines are extraordinarily expensive to repair and or replace. The property owner is responsible for the entire length of the sewer line from where it exits the house all the way to where it connects to the city sewer, under the street, under the alley, in the easement, or at the septic system if it's private. But they're responsible for that entire line. It can be quite costly. So for the cost of, in my case, my inspection, sewer line check, $325 gives you pretty good peace of mind to know what's happening with that sewer line. Additional specialty inspections that, of course, your clients could request. Pool, as of a few years ago, there is a safety inspection of the pool that is required now that comes with all inspections. The general inspector is required to inspect the pool for 7 listed items for safety. Of course, if they're concerned about radon, lead-based paint, asbestos, geological, these are all not part of a general physical inspection. And you should have your client look at this buyer's inspection election document. It has 37 inspections that they could elect to have, plus a line that says other. They could put in as many things as they wanted to in that line. So it's a good idea that they peruse through this, if or you can ask them questions. Are you concerned about radon gas? If they're yes, I'm concerned, and then you don't want it coming back to you, then have them check the box yes that they want a radon gas inspection and get that inspection for them. Now, the thing that I said earlier that you guys may find fun if you've not discovered this, but right here, can you all see my cursor, where my cursor is? Nod of the head. Cool. So it says here, buyer is responsible for choosing the provider and ordering the inspection. Buyer is responsible for choosing the provider and ordering the inspection. Now, I know we live in the real world, and I know you guys are busy managing your client's expectations, and you're managing the whole process of the inspection contingency, and you're managing the dates and the times and the entire calendar of the thing. And it would be very difficult for you to tell your buyer or your buyer to, hey, call the inspection company and book a sewer inspection or book the physical inspection. And then they call, and then we say we have availability at Thursday at 1. They book Thursday at 1. They call you back, say Thursday at 1. You look into your calendar and go, oh my God, I'm on another showing, or the seller's not going to be available. So obviously, you guys, it's more productive for you guys to manage that part of it. We totally get it. We totally understand it. But just know that your attorneys are recommending that you have your buyers do this. So just a lot of agents that just didn't know that, or like, whoa, I didn't even know that was there. But anyway, just know that it's important, I think. Again, going back to something I said earlier, we are under contract with that buyer and or that seller. So I think it's important that relationship has a chance to blossom, to bloom, if you will, to be created. It's nice to have a buyer and or seller call my office and learn about what the process is through my schedulers, learn about the different types of inspections that we provide. They get more involved, but we also know that it's not always the most realistic thing that can occur. Assist your seller, have pre-listing inspections. This is a hot topic. And I'm not just saying have pre-listing inspections because I'm a home inspector and I own a company that makes money off of inspecting. I do believe that oftentimes this can help. It can help a seller really understand managing their expectations, how to price the house accordingly, so forth and so on. Buyers don't want a money pit, so having pre-listing inspections can oftentimes help to create a rapport between a seller and a buyer. You as real estate agents, you've got a better finger on the pulse, if you will, of that sort of thing. So if you think it's a good idea, great, get us involved. If you don't, that's fine too. But from my experience and from what I've seen, oftentimes it can help. Your California Association of Realtors has a seller's advisory that talks about the marketing considerations. They consider doing what you can to prepare your property for sale. Just because they do decide to have an inspection and they find that the roof may be needing some surface or whatnot, doesn't mean they have to fix it. But can you imagine how far that disclosure would go? Here's a report that I had done before I listed my home. I listed the price accordingly. The roof does need some service, and the price is listed based on what this, helped based on what this inspection found. So there will be no negotiation, so forth and so on. So oftentimes it can be helpful. Sometimes it can be a hindrance. But as a home inspector, I've seen this work to the advantage of many sellers and buyers. Obviously, they have to disclose. So this is the thing that especially if they don't know, especially if a house is, let's say, maybe somebody has lived in that house for a very long time and they've passed away, and maybe their children or their grandchildren come in and now they've got to sell it. They don't know anything about the house. They really can't disclose anything. It might be a good idea to get a inspection. Now, an inspection is not in lieu of a disclosure, but it most certainly can help kind of determine what are we selling here? What is the condition here, and how can we price it accordingly? so forth and so on. You manage the transaction. Obviously, the contingency period and the transaction can become very confusing for both the buying and listing side. Educate and guide your clients using your realtor advisories. This is sort of a summary of what we've been talking about. Show them the answers in writing as best as you can. Allow your sellers and buyers to make their own decisions. Obviously, steer them, guide them, help them. But they should be talking directly to those experts in those fields, including the inspectors. And they need to read their inspection reports. I mean, why did they just pay $375, $425, $600, $800, whatever it was, for an inspection report? So they could just have a book, you know, that they just, you know, throw into the escrow folder that's now like this thick. So that that book is full of information. It's not only full of information of present time conditions and what they're buying, but it also has some helpful information that can help them maintain their home or service advisory, so forth and so on. So lots and lots of good information in those reports. Clients need to read their reports, instruct them to ask any questions of the inspectors that prepared their reports. Again, that takes the target off of your back saying, oh, the inspector said this about the roof. Well, let's actually see what the inspector said about the roof. And if they have questions about the roof, refer them to the inspector. So be proactive. Oh my God. Avoid surprises for buyers and sellers. It does. It avoids surprises if you're proactive. Get those pre-listing inspections, read inspection reports thoroughly, discuss defects with the client. Address safety and habitability issues on seller's terms. Because that's important. Again, you as realtors, if you're representing a seller, if you get those pre-listing inspections, you're going to know what those safety and habitability concerns are, and you can address them on the seller's terms. I've priced the home accordingly. I decided to fix this, but I didn't fix that, and I'm going to disclose it, so forth and so on. Price and disclose accordingly. So in summary, inspections provide valuable information, obviously. Let your clients decide on inspections, help them through it. You know, if they have concerns about certain things, then let them decide that they, you know, if they have concerns about the roof, get a separate roof inspection. If they have concerns about mold, get a mold inspection. Have your clients book their own inspections. Recommend pre-listing inspections. Reduce buyer, seller, and your own risk. Ooh, I feel like I just did that on one deep, big breath of air. Anyway, thank you very much. That was fabulous. I really enjoy sharing that information with you. Been a wonderful audience, and thank you for all of your participation. It's been fabulous. And for those of you out in Zoom land, as you're watching this, feel free to contact, you know, me through Sarah or me directly through my office if you have any questions on anything we've gone over here today. And right now, I'm going to throw it back to Jay. We can open up for questions or comments or whatnot. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That was really great. I really appreciate your time and you sharing your expertise with us. I'm so glad we got this recorded because we can offer this to our members. They can watch it on their time as well, because we recorded it concisely to a 1 hour recording. So I think it'll be wonderful. We can replay it back up on our YouTube so we can offer that. We so appreciate you're a valuable member to us as a strategic partner. We're grateful for how much you share your knowledge, and you're so education-based, and everything you've said today, I've gone through an experience, so greatly appreciate all of that. And it's interesting, the health and safety versus improvement upgrade is always the conversation to sit down the buyers to have. And reiterate over and over again how important it is that they are highly engaged in this process, because it is a very large purchase. So completely agree and understand, and everything you said today I've experienced and is very true. If you can't see it, check it.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's very important in my opinion. It's one of the most important things to get your clients engaged, get them engaged. Yep. You know, they have relationships with you as real estate agents. They need to have relationships with their inspectors, and they may have questions years later about something in their home that they can, you know, call their inspector about. They can help answer that question. So it's great to form that relationship as well.
Well, I would hope that they continue to stay in touch. That's the whole point, right, of having relationships. And so if it's days, months, or years later, hopefully that it's us we're calling and not someone else. Well, thank you all for joining us today.